Thank you. I think we'll just jump right into this fun topic of technology and ag and our food business. So why don't you just go down and tell the audience what you're working on right now.
Okay. Thank you. So I am a soybean geneticist and breeder, and so I have a breeding pipeline at Purdue, and I research how to efficiently breed soybeans, and as part of that, since 2014, I've been working with using drone imaging in breeding trials, and so my research has expanded into remote sensing and phenotyping, measuring growth and development, and how to use those data. And I also have as part of that, a startup company. We sell software for drone image analysis, and so I can speak to technology in the form of genetics, and I'm glad that Ted McKinney brought that subject of genetics up, because I think a lot of the technology we've been talking about this morning is also genetics, not just digital and machinery, that kind of thing. So.
Morning, everyone. It's interesting to see how IBM is the only technology company that has survived for the last 100 years. And the recipe for that was having research and having our strategy mainly being led by research. And this year, every year we have what we call IBM 5 in 5, which is 5 predictions that will change the world in 5 years, in the next 5 years. And all the 5 this year came out with food and agriculture needs. So that is to say that all the work we're doing today is now being consolidated with that vision, and we propose that vision to the top management to then define the strategy instead of driving the research from the strategy. So we saw digital transformation coming to farming, but we also saw an opportunity for consolidate the data and derive value throughout the value chain. So what we're doing today is really looking at agribusiness, not looking only at agriculture, and how we can bring value to the farm, and how can we extract value from the data coming out of the field to the entire supply chain globally.
So, first of all, thank you very much for Apex to invite us. It's a pleasure to be here. So, I'm from Brazil. Nobody will notice because of my lack of accent and perfect English, so sorry about that. So, as Beth mentioned, I spent my last 10, 11 years working with digital ag. First as a farmer, so I used to work in a large operation in Brazil. After that, joined Solinftec, and 5 years working with many farmers in Brazil, Bailey to Bailey, as Ted just mentioned. So I'm glad to hear a lot of people talking about technology and how technology is improving, and it's amazing. We are going to share some data, some information here, how this digital ag that we talk a lot, how it's changing the way we farm. So it's happening in Brazil, it's happening here in the US. So forgot to mention Solinftec. It's a Brazilian ag tech company, and I think I can say now it's an American ag tech as well. Thank you for Purdue and West Lafayette and the government of Indiana. So now we have our office here in US, and we're working with both Brazilian and farmers in Brazil and here in US. What we do, it's an internet of everything for farmers. We collect data from many sources. So we collect and connect machines, seeds, chemicals, people, weather, and we try to come with the best answer for the farmer in real time. So it's much more to support farmers and how can they make decisions in real time instead of looking for data that just passes. So our idea is to how can we support farmers when they need it, like during planting, during harvesting, and the hardest part for them. So we have been working hard for the last 10 years. So as Beth mentioned, we have 20 million acres with our solution running in some countries, Brazil, US, and some other countries in South America. So we are very proud to say, and it's part of what I want to discuss, I want to talk here, is 20 million acres with paid clients. For me it means a lot, because it means that who worked with farmers, you know that they are skeptical, and when farmers are paying for something, it means that you are adding value for them. So that's part of I want to discuss here and part what I have been doing in the last years.
Wonderful. Katie, can you expand a little more on gene editing and the genetic side of technology that could have benefits for farmers?
Yes, so I was thinking of, during some of the earlier discussions about the wonderful numbers around intensification and increased productivity on, in some cases even less land than in the past. And in many crops, the estimate is 50% of that yield increase or productivity increase is due to genetics. And actually, recent estimates in soybean and maize, I believe, are 80% of the yield increases are due to genetic improvements. At the same time, when we look at the rate of yield increase in crops, we're not always sure if we're on a sort of trajectory that will meet future needs. And so breeders always have to be cognizant about how we can maintain or improve what we call our rate of genetic gain. So more bushels per acre per cycle is, and in order to do that, we have to increasingly be efficient, implement best practices, and be very proactive. And I think digital ag is a big part of that. What that means for farmers is that we need to always be delivering new varieties that are well tested. Gene editing is a form of crop improvement. I'm a breeder, but I also do have projects in gene editing, and I think the potential there is, it's one of many tools, and it's going to be and is an important tool to because it's going to, we know with climate change that the pests and diseases are going to probably be even more of an issue or less predictable, and we need to be responsive. So I think that there's a lot of potential for digital ag and genetics to work together, because I think in addition to increasing genetic gain, we need to be more responsive to the emerging issues in genetics to keep the farmers productive.
And Louis, you had talked about how food companies and others in the supply chain can benefit from the digital technology. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. Obviously, everyone knows that we are facing a challenge of producing more food. But what it takes for food companies, so they need to ensure supply somehow. And a way for them to ensure supply is to really leverage digital that's happening at the farm level and bring that to the enterprise level. So not only to leverage that, but also to scale and promote digital agriculture. So we can see clients with, if you just type sustainable farming or sustainable agriculture enterprise or for food companies, you're going to see trading companies, food companies really promoting and having a very strong and aggressive plan to empower and deliver digital agriculture to their farmers. So let's take an example of a beverage company willing to have 7 million hectares covered digitally, fully digitally covered with technology, so they can see how crops are performing, they can see how they can improve quality, or how they can have the fit for purpose crop that they need for their production systems. So that's only one example. Another one would be how can insurance companies provide better insurance policies, or to promote insurance at a lower cost for farmers because they have access to the data. So we're seeing that now digital has developed, it's becoming more and more present at farm level, but now we're seeing another wave coming from the private sector, from food and trade companies willing to leverage that and empower that even more, because there is value beyond the fence. So we talked about yield, so that's probably one of the major value levers for farmers, but we also can think about how can we improve the supply chain, how can we get best or faster foods into the manufacturing lines. We're even thinking about the consumer at the end of the line. So we have consumers changing tastes every 2 days or 3 days on Instagram. How do we develop a new molecule that takes 10 years to cope with that change in demand? How can we make a faster supply chain? So now we see that there is potential for digital agriculture to be beyond farming, beyond agriculture, and also a way to derive value to the farmer, because value is elsewhere, the money is elsewhere. So eventually will be CBOT priced crops but on the top there may be an extra dollar because of the value data brings on the top of the bushel.
Daniel, you gave us some examples yesterday about some farmers that you were working with. How are they using technology to really improve production and make more money?
So something that and I personally believe a lot, is we talk about a lot of barriers, so data sharing or no connectivity, sorry, and some of the others. But I truly believe that when we add value for farmers, they can measure it, they will start using that. And we have some pretty good examples from Brazil, for example. So sometimes we discuss a lot about new generation, old generation. And so let's take sugarcane. Sugarcane, it's a 500 years industry in Brazil. Some say that's traditional. I don't believe, but some say that is traditional. So lack of communication. The largest part of the sugarcane area in Brazil, there is no connectivity. And the last years under financial stress. So, but I don't have like official statistics, but sugarcane for me and from the people that know is the most advanced digital ag adoption in the world. It's the crop that have been adopting digital ag at the most. I can tell you that 70% of the whole sugarcane in Brazil is produced based on digital ag, with information coming in each minute. And when I'm say each minute, I don't mean like one equipment or one weather station. I mean all the equipment. Some examples, for example, Raízen, the largest producer of sugarcane in the world, 2.5 million acres of operation, around 3,000 to 4,000 pieces of machine running 24 hours per day. They have all the information in each minute. So based on that, they adopted it in 2 years in all the mills that they have. And based on that, they reported a 50% drop in their operational cost in 2 years. So another example, Cofco, a big trade company in Brazil that adopted digital ag. So from 1 year to the other, they cut 40% of the whole fleet harvesting. So reported by the president of the company. So it's happening with sugarcane. Another number from sugarcane, 40% of the sugarcane produced in Brazil, 40%, we have the whole traceability, just based on this kind of solution. Row crops, it's not different. So all the big players or the large players in Brazil, how can I say the early adopters have been adopting technology in Brazil. So Amage, Bom Futuro, Terra Santa, so some with more than 1 million acres of soybean and cotton and corn. They are fastly adopting digital ag. So some of them has all their farms with digital ag at this moment. Most of the time we can call the farm. Sometimes we have people working there. We can call the farm, but I can see every machine, every single piece of machine working and doing. And when something is going wrong or something that's happening outside of what we have planned, we help them, we support them to change the way they are operating. So the results are amazing. Different from sugarcane row crops, it's really important. Reduce input, so sustainability. It was amazing to hear in the last panel everybody talking about that. It's happening. Sometimes we talk about that and we think, oh, it will come. It's happening. So today in Brazil, with lack of connectivity in the Midwest of Brazil, we have sprayers connected with weather stations to avoid spray chemical, and so in a weather condition that will not be the best one to have the efficiency of that chemical. So, and again, it's not just happening in Brazil. Here in the US, it's the same thing. 1 year working here, we are working with many progressive farms near Indiana or near Purdue, and some co-ops as Growmark, for example, here in the US. And after some months showing them the results, we have the plan to implement digital ag in all their agri-retail chain in 3 years. So when you show the value, it's happened, and believe in me, in somebody that's looking for that every day, the impact, it's huge. Like the amount of chemical, the amount of inputs, the number of equipment we can take off the fields, it's unbelievable. So that's
wonderful. I'm going to throw one out so all of you guys can think about this and answer it. How could Brazil and the U.S. cooperate on innovative technology so that everyone benefits? I'll start with Katy. That's a big question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as an academic, I really would like to see more scientific and scholarly exchange. And as a soybean breeder, it's a very very high priority for me to have that be around soybean production. You know, collectively we produce 65% of global soybeans, and just to try to learn from each other on disease management. I think that there's a lot of space there, and also to work together on addressing genetic diversity of soybeans, the reduction of it. Other ways to promote cooperation and collaboration between the countries is probably, to echo what the panel and some of the speakers were saying earlier, for us to not view each other as competitors, but cooperators or co-opetitors, I think, and realize the strengths. And I think that could emerge from maybe from the academic side, with students being trained more internationally because they know, if they go into jobs in the private sector, they will be international. And then I think there's definitely a role for the private sector and startups to, contribute to that. And the other space, Purdue has been promoting, part of a program to promote Brazilian and U.S. Startups to have an exchange, and so that kind of activity as well.
All right. Well, there are several things I can think of. I think the first one is in terms of responsibility. So as the two main agricultural powerhouses in the world, we have the responsibility to feed the world somehow. And that's not a question of competing, that's a question of collaboration. Also thinking of the geographical positioning, we have tropical and temperate agriculture. So when you think about exchanging research on that, we're pretty much covering almost everything that can happen.
But there are problems shared as well, even though the climates are very different.
Exactly. Looking at in terms of crops, I mean, mostly everything that's planted in the world is planted in the two countries. So looking at crop modeling, looking at digital agronomy, not digital agriculture, on modeling diseases and all that, there is a huge field of cooperation. And the last point would be still thinking about beyond agriculture. We have a lot of companies, both Brazilian and American, that benefit from each other. We have Deere, we have Cargill, we have ADM. So there is commerce between these companies in terms of input, seeds, fertilizer, and all this. And if Brazil is not number one, I bet it's number two for all these companies. So there is also commerce and trade to be sustained, developed, and enhanced from that collaboration. So I would go in these three directions in terms of collaboration, not only thinking about the output, but thinking about the input and the supply chains as well.
Some people say that sometimes I take things so simple, but I think we are already doing that for what we heard here. And I think like our example, so ag-tech company coming from the countryside of São Paulo, so and open office here and talking with farmers here in the U.S. and being like they are hearing us and believing on us. So I think it's a good step, and it happened because of Purdue and because of the support that we have. So it's amazing. I think it's happening with ag-tech or with new companies like startups. It will foster that. And I think research obviously has this huge responsibility to do that. I think it's much more easy. And trade issues, as Tad just said, we are gonna always have that. But I think like this, startups, new companies, new researches, and this exchange of information will foster that. Will even with trade issues, we can keep with the connections with the breach. So it's I think it's maybe so simple, but I think it's happening.
And I know you mentioned trade issues. There are obstacles to technology. Here we are in Washington, D.C., so let's ask, what could our governments do to help bring technology to more farmers, to agribusiness, and to help the world? Tell the government what to do.
That's dangerous, especially in DC. No, I think that one thing that everyone could think about is how to make data accessible and what will be the regulation around data. Because data today is mainly consolidated in silos and everyone's trying to extract value from that little piece of data, while Solinftec is raising a lot of data from farms. On the other side, we have an example of European regulations. So you have the data, how an exporter can have access to that data to provide a certificate on the origin. So how can banks provide cheaper credit because they have access to data? So I think if we can think about land and how what's the policy and the regulation on extracting a biography of that land, that piece of land, the data related to how the land has been managed, and protecting the owner of the land, that could be a very interesting way for everyone to benefit from it.
Well, at the same time, the era of digital ag has really highlighted how little data we actually have in agriculture, and it's a unique problem because that starts with rural connectivity, right? So I think we all deal with the fact that technologies may be developed assuming that there's internet everywhere or that kind of thing, and we know in agriculture that's not true. And so the most successful solutions actually maybe work around that. So yeah, that's a major issue if we want to push technology forward, is to have better connectivity.
So for sure, for me, like government has an important role, maybe the central role on that, because we are discussing here about how we're going to change the way we produce food, and how can we avoid problems around climate change and how to be more sustainable, and all those things. Government will have always an important role. And as an entrepreneur, as a startup, as I think researchers, we need to know that we need to work with government to help, to support, and maybe to make them understand what we need, like what we are, like what us as a farmer or as an entrepreneur that is talking every day with farmers, like to make government understand what their needs. And as we are working with innovation, new ways to do that, maybe we can help government to foster the adoption and to understand what's happening. So that is, for me, it's more than how to do that. Maybe I don't know, but the only thing that I know is we need to keep close to understand and to support in this decision. But no doubt it's an important role.
Okay, so we have to ask, like, if you look down 5 years from now, 5-10 years, pick a technology, pick something that you think could really change the game here.
Well, I'm really enthused about targeted management. So, I mean, there are stressors that we have good management solutions for that are currently being applied or used, the management solutions on a broad scale when they could be more targeted or focused. And so I think using remote sensing to understand where the stressors are and what they are, and then reduce our inputs and be more effective in their control. I think that's going to be the biggest sort of game changer for me.
I think there will be no one technology, and people tend to think of what is the magical technology that will solve the problem. So technology today is accessible through the cloud. It's cheap. You pay per use. So that's you don't need to buy a mainframe anymore and spend $1,000 to keep that mainframe. That's cheap. So instead of thinking of technology as what problem needs to be solved, what's the use case that needs to be solved? Is it about supply chain? Is it about yield? Is it about genetics? And then technology will come as a mean for that, not as a solution for that. So let's think of the problem we want to solve and narrow down the problem to pieces that we can solve with technology instead of thinking the other way.
Good.
So, as I told you, I am a believer. So I think the landscape, the whole landscape in agriculture will change a lot. There's technologies that we are calling digital, so it's a bunch of them. Will change a lot the way we produce and even the interactions. So we're gonna see, for me, we're gonna see established companies like being challenged to change the way they operate. Like instead of how can I will sell more, they will have to think about how I will make my farmers use less machine, less chemical, less fertilizer. So it's a challenge, and I think digital will help a lot that. And I think it's a good opportunity, or it's a huge opportunity for new companies that will come with this idea, and will be easier for them to take this approach and having data to analyze everything that we are doing instead of making so many decisions based on gut feelings that most of the time we do it in the farming level. So I think we're going to change from gut feelings to having data in real time to change the way you're doing that. And for sure, we're going to save a lot of chemical, a lot of inputs, so, and we'll be much more sustainable.
Wonderful. I want to see if anyone in the audience has any questions for these guys. Chris?
Chris Clayton, I'm an ag editor from Omaha, Nebraska. Can you hear me? As Mr. Fonseca, I hope I pronounced that correctly, you piqued my attention when you said that something regarding saving money on crop insurance through digital data. Farmers already provide a lot of data to the crop insurance companies annually. Can you tell me what exactly what more is needed in terms of digital data that would help farmers save money on crop insurance? What's the extra hook there?
So I can't say one specific data, but think of the level of penetration of crop insurance. At least in several countries I work with, that's very low. So, and that's basically because the premiums required by the insurance companies are not properly managed, because they don't have recurrent overseeing on how the crop is performing. So they're not able to support farmers or give back to farmers in terms of forecasts, or an extreme case. So harvest this week because there is a 9% likelihood of a hailstorm next week. So we see not a question of providing additional data, but it's providing two-sided communication, how these two entities can work together and for the benefit of each other.
Any other questions?
I have a question for Daniel. You mentioned that that you think sugarcane production is the most digitized agriculture. Does farmer age have anything to do with that? Why is that? I understand some of the unique qualities of sugarcane production, so I guess I'm more wondering about farmer age or education, or because that is one thing we haven't discussed here, is that's a barrier to adoption of technology potentially.
So if we look for sugarcane, it's a vertical. We have a huge integration. We have everything in one place, so it helps a lot. So we can connect. It's easier to connect machines with the mill, so you can have you look for all the bottlenecks. But when we go to farm in Brazil, like to row crops in Brazil, it's kind of the same as we have here in the US. Different generations working together, and it's impressive how when you talk with them, doesn't matter the age, they understand the benefits, because it is not like showing them data, it's showing them answers that they have been looking for these answers for a while. So it changed. We talk here with farmers here in the US. I spend a lot of time talking with many farmers around Purdue, and same thing, young ones and old ones. When you talk with them, they don't like. I think the difference is if you show them data, if you ask them to deal with so many tools, they will not like that. But when you come with answers, and answers that they have been looking for a while, they understand the value. I think that's the main difference.
I think that's one of the good points is when we look at technology, how do we make it so that smaller farmers can also benefit, older farmers who aren't as tech savvy? How do we make it so that everyone can benefit? It's difficult.
Well, I think there is an economic solution for that. We heard this morning that 70% of production, both in Brazil and the US, come from big farmers. What about that make from 30% of the farmers? So what about the other 70%? So, and a lot of companies we see in the ag space today, they charge $1 per hectare, and they don't solve the entire problem. So how can a small farmer afford for the entire set of technology he needs to be very efficient when the business model doesn't allow for that? So that's where we really think at IBM that companies in quest for insurance supply will come to the smaller farmers that have a potential to increase yield much more than a big farmer that can buy for the technology, and they're gonna start to consolidate this market and have them into an ecosystem that has loyalty. It's a win-win for everyone, that's sustainable, it's financially sustainable. So we see the market going that direction in terms of technology adoption at the farm level.
So just to add something, I believe that the problem for small farmers are even bigger for the large ones. I always like to give one example. If a large farm somewhere, Brazil or US, start spraying, for example, and they spray, I don't know, so for 3 or 4 hours and the wrong weather condition, probably they can lose part of the chemical, lose or burn the crop or burn your neighbor crop doing something. It's a huge problem for them because they will do it in almost the whole farm. But when we do it in a large farm, it's just a small piece of that. So the risk for small farmers, it's even bigger. So, and I don't think that the price or the cost to adopt new technologies are so high. I believe that it's much, much more cheaper than fertilizer, much more cheaper than chemicals, and much more cheaper than machines, to add more machines.
And cheaper than seed.
Cheaper than seed, yes. So what I think is we are losing a lot of those inputs, and we can, based on technology, we can save a lot of that and even differentiate ourselves from others that are not doing that. That's why I think it will happen pretty fast if we as an industry, if we can show the farmers that we are not just adding value, but showing that, prove them that we are adding value, as we are trying to do all the time, they will adopt it. I think no barriers about even connectivity. In Brazil, row crop, there is no connectivity. Farmers, they come with infrastructure. It's not expensive. Farmers in Brazil are installing 4G in those farms because they see value on that. They see that 4G with narrow band, sometimes we don't have it even in São Paulo. They are installed in the center of the farm to have 4G in the farm. So if they see the value, if they can measure and touch the value, they will adopt it. So that is my belief.
Well, you bring up a point, though, I have to say, coming from the land grant system, that it does help smaller farmers to have access to independent third-party, information about how to manage crops. And I think it's a good point that digital technology is cheaper than some of the other inputs, but I still think there's a need to have an independent voice on what works and what doesn't.
I agree. And I would just make a point that's interesting, because now we're seeing in a few farms an additional business model, which is selling connectivity to the farms around it. So we're seeing that digital is really opening other possibilities on the top of the core operation, which is harvesting, farming. We're seeing, companies becoming small local operators to provide that and allow the growth and development of the region.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll continue the conversation.
Sure.
Thank you.